The last video that we started looking at scripting in MySQL. We've been doing this through the command line, but in the video that I had just made, I was using MySQL Workbench and realized that I had to show you how to do that. And this actually can be a useful tool. Some of you are having some issues getting the command line set up. So let's try this. I'm going to go to Database and Connect. I'm going to take a look at the grades database, and I'm going to open up some queries that I've already written. But notice that when you open this up, it actually puts you in a query scripting window. So we can start writing queries right here. You can save the queries, and we can create new queries. So let's see, I'm going to go ahead and open up one that I've already written. So this is the create student database query. This is the one I actually used to create the grades database in the previous video. So I'm going to go through that because there's something in there that I want to point out. And let's see. I have to be a little careful. I want to open up some more scripts, but you can't just open them up, because if you do, it just opens them up in the current tab. So what I need here is a new tab. So if you go over here, you create a new SQL tab for executing queries. I'm going to open up a few of these. Let's see, that might be enough. Okay, what else do I want? I want aggregates. That's one of the ones we looked at in the last video. So we'll quickly review that. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I may need that anyways. And let's see, we have create students. I want select and joins. And I think the subqueries we're going to leave probably for the third installment. Well, maybe not. We'll see. We'll get to that. Okay. So aggregates and select, these are the two queries that we went through in the previous video. So select the average of score 1 from grades.exam, select the maximum, the minimum. We can count the students, if you remember this. The select, we selected all from grades.students, and we decided we only want 2 columns from grades.students. In this case, we chose the people with middle name Leslie, and then we chose the people that got greater than 65. So we used the where command again, or the where attribute. Where modifier to figure out who had a score of greater than 65. Now, what I didn't tell you is how I actually made the grades database, and we had gone over the grades database. And so let's just quickly open that up. So we got a lot of queries going on here. Notice when I open these up, these are actually all queries themselves. Let's see, we have some students: Jim Bob, Jane Bob, Robert Bob, and Fred Bob, if that sounds familiar. And then we have their grades on exam 1, exam 2, and exam 3. And one of the features of this that's a little bit different than what I've done before is this ID here from the students is the same. It's actually a primary key. So this primary key in this table is also a primary key in the exam 1, exam 2, and exam 3 tables. So how did I do that? Well, I'm going to come back and show you the script that I used to create this database. Now, it's kind of a long script, so I don't want to hit maybe every little detail, but this should look familiar. So we're going to create the database called grades, and if it already exists, we're going to drop it so that we can run this multiple times, the script multiple times, and then it doesn't cause an error when it finds that grades has already been made. So we're going to create the table for students. This stores their last name, their first name, and their middle name, and an ID. And then we want to create a table exam 1, and this is the part that's a little bit different. So we're going to declare student to be an int in the primary key, and then the student we're going to declare as a foreign key to grades.student, ID student. So that sets this up then, the primary key from students to be then the primary key for exam 1, something very similar for exam 2, something very similar for exam 3, and then, down here, inserts. So we've seen these inserts before, and this is where I'm just putting information into those tables. But this gives you an idea how you can use a primary key from one table as a primary key for another table. So this is really an aside from the query business, but I thought it was interesting and perhaps worth pointing out since I've been asked this question before. All right, so this has been 5 minutes of review of what's gone on, and we've gone over the aggregates, we've gone over the select. So now I want to talk about joins. All right, so joins, this was mentioned in one of the very early videos of this course. Joins gives you a way to put information from two tables together. So we'll have a student table that keeps track of name information, and then we have a bunch of exam tables that show student grades for various exams. But in the exam tables, we don't have any student names. So if you wanted to know students what grades they got on what exams, you can't do that from the one exam table. You have to go reference then the table that has name information. So for example, I have student 2 here, Jane Bob. If I go over to exam 3, all I have here is student 2 scored a 90. And without knowing this information about students, I wouldn't know that that was Jane Bob. All I would have is student 2. Not very useful. All right, so this is where joins come in. Here is the basic format then. Select. So this gives you an opportunity again to list out the columns that you want to list. List out the columns that you want. And then this again gets into this idea of a unique naming system. So last name, first name, and a good idea that I use score 1 here instead of just score. Scores, I could have used score in multiple tables, but I decided only to use score 1 for exam 1, score 2, exam 2, etc. So to avoid confusion. So I know now which table I'm referencing because these variables have unique names for each table. And then I'm choosing these last name, first name from grades.students. And then I'm going to join to that grades.exam1. That's where score 1 is going to come from. The order here is not so important, but it just seems fair that if the last name and first name are sort of first, then I would list that table first. And now we need an on command. So I'm going to join these two together, but how am I going to join them? I can't just take two tables that are disparate and have nothing in common and put them together. That doesn't really make sense. So I have to tell then SQL what the commonality is. And the commonality is the thing that we've been forcing through the foreign key is that the grades, the name student from exam 1, or not the name, the ID, the student number from grades.exam1 has to be the same as the one for students for grades.students. So these two IDs have to be the same. So if we run this thing, just click the little exclamation point and run this, then sure enough, let's forget this, we get then last name, first name, and their score on exam 1. Well, that's great, but what if we wanted to know all their scores, not just the score from exam 1? What if we wanted 3 scores for all the exams? So now we want the last name, the first name, the score from exam 1, the score from exam 2, and the score from exam 3. The reason why I'm doing this example is to show you that not only can you join 2 tables, but you can join multiple tables together. So I'm joining all these tables together, and in this case, we're using the fact that the ID for the student is always used as the primary key. In these other tables, we could have different equalities here, so this could be set up different ways, but this is just how it works out in our case. But the format is essentially the same as what we had up here. So we select, we list the columns that we want the MySQL to report out to us. We tell it from which table we're going to pull these things, but then we're going to join on these other tables. So we're going to start off with students. That'll give us the name information. And we're going to join in and grades from exam 1 as long as they have the students have the same IDs. So Jim Bob's only going to get Jim Bob's grades reported for him. We're going to join in exam 2, same thing. They have to have the same student ID to match up. And then exam 3, they have to have the same student ID. So SQL is going to go out, it's going to look and say, okay, I've got this student whose ID's number is 2. Now let me go search through exam 3, and let me look for the student with the same ID number. When it finds that student, then it's going to say, oh, so exam 3 for this row should be that. Okay, so I've already run this. Remember, I already ran the script, and I have the results here. It's in result 2, and we see that it lists our students, and then it lists out their scores on each of the exams in a nice little table. So yeah, it does a good job there. I guess what would you expect, right? Looks nice. Okay. Now, there's a reason why I covered aggregates earlier. I want to come back to then the aggregates again, the average, the max, the min, the count, because it turns out that you can run those in a where. So, continuing with the examples that we had before, so I'm going to extend out the example where we're reporting the last name, the first name, and the score from grades, students, and the grades in exam 1. I've joined these together to make sure they have the same IDs. But I'm going to add to this a where, and the where is going to be, I want all the students that scored more than 64 on an exam. So basically I'm saying which students passed my exam. All right, so we have another clause. That's the word I've been looking for this whole video. Man, I forgot the word clause. We have the where clause. And it turns, so you can, I guess what I'm trying to get at with this example is a few things. One is you can have a lot of different options under select, right? We've got the join on, you can have a where clause, and there's other clauses that we're going to talk about in future videos. So these select statements can actually get quite lengthy. But if we do this, we should get we should get 3 of the students. The only person we shouldn't get is Jim Bob, right? All right, so I'm going to go up to our little lightning bolt here and execute this. We're going to ignore that other thing. And here we go. So here are the 3 students that passed score 1. So they have a score of greater than 64. And you could think of more complicated questions here. I mean, we could think about, can you print all the students that passed at least one exam? Or can you print all the students that passed all the exams? In this case, those would all be the same. But how would you code that? So, again, future videos, these are things that we might want to think about as we get a little more sophisticated in our code. But this portion of the video is supposed to be about subqueries. So let's talk about that. This is almost the exact same set of code we had up above, except for right here, instead of greater than 64. So up here I had the 64 hard-coded. I knew that anything more than 64 was passing. Here I have an equal sign, and I'm going to run another query. So remember this query? This comes back from aggregates. Select max, column, and then from a table. Well, this is exactly what I'm typing here. Notice it's in parentheses. Okay, so this is going to give a result back, and I'm going to select the maximum from exam 1, score 1, and then this tells us which table that's coming from, and I'm going to get that maximum grade, and then I'm going to look at which students have a score equal to that maximum grade. And if you remember in the previous video, I had said there's a way to print out which students have the highest score. Well, this is how you do it right here. You run a subquery. So we run a subquery to figure out who's got what the maximum grade on exam 1 is, and then we ask, okay, so which student has a score equal to that? Let's print out their last name, first name, and we'll go ahead and print the score. And so that's our result 2 here, and it's Jane Bob with a score of 91 in the first exam. Okay, well, that's almost it for this video. Oh, there's one more thing. When you're learning a new programming language, and scripting databases is another programming language, one of the first things you should ask yourself is, how do I put comments in? And it's almost always the same answer, $. So in this case, you notice that I've started to comment my scripts a little bit. If you see that $sign and think hashtag, please stop. All right, have a good one.